Okay, good morning again, friends and family. So what is it like to go from the wilds and colds of St. Albert to the tropics of Antigua? That's what this presentation is all about. Some bit of our journey. I'm going to have some help. Jolie's going to help me, and Sarah's going to help me in the presentation. But we have to begin with first things first. What is the proper pronunciation of this country? It is not Antigua, even though you Spanish speakers would say, well, yeah, that's how you pronounce that word. It means old, and you'd be absolutely correct. But the Antiguans themselves do not pronounce it that way. They pronounce it with a hard G, so Antigua. So just as it's not Illinois, but Illinois, it's not Maryland, but Maryland, it's not Arkansas, but Arkansas, it's not Antigua, it's Antigua. So armed with that now, you're ready to come and visit and sound like a local when you land and are talking to the customs officer. Just to make sure you're staying awake, where exactly is Antigua? I'm going to give you three options here. Is it the blue arrow, the red arrow, or the green arrow? Okay, you guys are smart. But now, let's make it a little bit more difficult. Let's broaden the map. Now, which of the islands is Antigua? I'm going to give you some choices again. Is it the black, or is that green? I think that's green. Is it blue? Is it red? Is it black? Is that your final answer? Red, that's Antigua, yeah. The island in the south, that's Grenada. We do have a church and a school in Grenada. It doesn't have as many members. The school is not quite as big. I'd say they average about 50 in worship. They have a beautiful worship facility, just as you do, and they're really primed for a lot of outreach as well. We also have a congregation in St. Lucia, and that's about a 2-hour flight south of Antigua. And then the other one that was circled is Puerto Rico. We also have had missionaries there. We continue to have an indigenous church where they do Hispanic work. We also have a presence in Dominica and Haiti. Work is being done there, not by a resident missionary, but someone pops in and out working with the national pastors. And just to kind of fill out the map a little bit here, you have Jamaica, Cuba, and then what are the islands to the north? Yeah, the Bahamas, right? Those are the ones that are closest to Florida. Antigua itself is 108 square miles. What does that mean? How does that compare to maybe another island you visited, the island of Oahu? Oahu, of course, is not one of the bigger Hawaiian islands, is it? But you could still fit 5 Antiguas into the island of Oahu. So that really gives you an idea that we live in a small neighborhood. Here's a little bit of what Antigua looks like. Shirley Heights is probably the #1 tourist spot. The British had a naval base down below, and so they had a fortress overlooking to keep the French and the Spanish out. You can hike up to Shirley Heights, or you can drive up to it. Looking down below is Freeman's Bay, also known as Galleon Beach. It's one of our favorite snorkeling spots. You see all sorts of critters down there, and I'll tell you more about that. This is what else the coastline looks like. And Jordan, you might just need to adjust the volume, so I'll leave that to you. Got a little video here. The story is we went to this exploring, and I found this blowhole, and Sarah wasn't there yet. So I said, Sarah, come here, you just got to see the waves. I placed her right in front of the blowhole, and that's why she screamed. But she's always a good sport. I'm gonna reboot the computer, okay, Jordan, because I don't think my volume here is turned up. So just give me a second. To work around that. All right. They say there are 365 beaches in Antigua, Here are just a few of them. Their tagline is a beach for every day of the year. Deep Bay is a beautiful one. Pigeon Point is a fun family beach. That's me. Valley Church, just this beautiful colored water, water you don't see anywhere else. Except we were up at Lake O'Hara, and the glacial melt kind of makes that same Caribbean blue color of water. What's that? Not quite as warm, no. Fry's Beach, we have members who have kind of a tourist, they run a tourist business, and they have a little shack there where they bring people to. Average temperature, people are always curious about that. We go from 25 degrees up to about 31, 32 degrees. It doesn't vary, so it's that all year round. So very comfortable, but the drawback is the trade-off is the humidity, so the average humidity is 80%. It doesn't always feel so hot, especially if you're in the shade, because we have the trade winds that are constantly blowing and cooling us off. So we don't have air conditioning in our house. We don't have air conditioning in the church and the office. And as long as you have a window and you're facing that breeze, you're pretty good. It's only when the hurricanes come through and they're sucking up all the energy and then everything gets still, then it feels really hot and really sticky. Average rainfall is 46 inches. Here in central Alberta, 19 inches is what I read, although probably it's a lot more this summer, right? Yeah. So you might think 46 inches, that sounds about right for a tropical island, but Antigua is really quite dry, and so you see the cacti there, and it has that kind of deserty feel to it. The islands to the south of St. Lucia, Dominica, for example, they get 3 times the amount of rain, so they have a lot more agriculture than we do. This Turk's Head cactus is kind of interesting. It has a fruit that you can just pluck and pop in your mouth, and it tastes a bit like kiwi without the tartness. So another one of the fun things. We don't have any running rivers in Antigua, so where do we get our water from? It's all rainwater. So you have to be very careful on how you use that water. We have a cistern that's underneath our porch, and that's where all the water is gathered. And thankfully, we have a frog who oversees our rainwater, so to make sure that it's clean and good for drinking, washing, everything else. What other kind of critters do we have? Not a whole lot in Antigua. We have lizards and geckos, but we also have these guys, which are all over our yard. Take a look at what this guy is doing. So I know it looks like something out of a horror film, and I'm not talking about the tarantula, I'm talking about the fact that we have 6 cats. You can ask Sarah about that. But yeah, he just went on his merry way. The cats aren't really sure what to do with them. But that's our life. Tarantulas. Tarantulas are, they bite, and I think there's a bit of venom, but it's not going to do anything to you. Trust me, Ingrid. Other critters, like I said, are really found in the ocean. So the one spot you want to go to as a tourist is a Stingray City, and you take this boat 8 minutes out off the island, and there's a sandbar, and these 4 to 5 foot wide female southern rays come up to you because they hear the boats, they know they're going to be feeding squid. And they give you squid to feed them. You're supposed to hold it in your hand, put your thumb down, and just have the head of the squid sticking up, and they come up to you and they just kind of suck it out. And that's fine as long as you have a squid. If you don't have a squid, then they give you what's called a stingray hickey. And Sarah got one on her knee because there was like 3 of them around her, and it's left a scar. So that's her battle wound from Antigua so far. Other animals that we see, hawksbill turtle. I see these often when we're snorkeling. How big? This one was probably 3 feet, I don't know, diameter, I'm just guessing. They can get bigger, but you see smaller ones as well. There's another very rare aquatic white guy. Squid or cuttlefish, we haven't quite figured out, but take a look at what happens.
Water, that's how it moves.
I'll find out.
No video too. See that? See that black stuff? Look. Oh.
Let's watch that in slow motion. Jolie is fine. She remains fine. She's a little radioactive, but otherwise, yeah. Let me share with you a little bit about the historical timeline of Antigua. In 2400 BC, these are all guesses by anthropologists, but the Siboney, they were an indigenous group that came up from South America. They started to populate the islands. They settled and were quite peace-loving, agricultural-minded. They would also get things out of the ocean to survive. They were replaced by the Arawak in 35 AD. And then in 1100, the Caribs came along. And the Caribs were quite aggressive and militaristic, and some would even say cannibalistic, though that hasn't really been verified whether or not they ate their enemies, but that's what they say. The Caribs remained the main people there until 1493. So this is on one of Columbus' subsequent journeys. He lands in Antigua, and he's the one who gives it its name after a patron saint in a cathedral in mid-Spain, in the middle of Spain. But the Europeans really don't settle Antigua until 1632. You have some settlers from the north, just an island just north of us, St. Kitts. They came down, but it isn't until 1674 that things take off as far as industry goes. Sir Christopher Codrington, he brings the latest in sugarcane technology, and he identifies Antigua as a good place to raise sugarcane. And of course, that was the cash crop in those days. You still have these windmills that were used to crush the cane and to process it. You see them all over the island. Here's one that's been restored. You never see the windmill on any of these except the ones that are restored. Otherwise, you just see these round turrets. And there's 150 of them that are still dotting the island. Some have been made into apartments. Others are a part of our police station right down the hill from us. Others are used kind of as a billboard type of thing. So it's quite interesting. As you're walking around, you're going, wow, those things are 300-400 years old. And, you don't have that, at least I didn't really have that idea about Antigua and its history until living there. Because sugarcane was such an important crop, the British, of course, they want to protect their investment. So there was a naval base on Antigua, and Horatio Nelson, the famous admiral, he even spent 3 years in Antigua, but he didn't like it. It was too hot, too sticky, too many mosquitoes. He was glad to get home. Slavery was abolished in 1834, but Antigua remained under Britain's as a protectorate, but they gained independence in 1981. And independence is celebrated in November, and everyone wears the traditional Madras dress, as it's called. Why those colors? They simply had a competition who could come up with the best colors, costume, and that was the winning one, so there isn't any kind of connection to their past that I know of. But it is fun to see, especially the kids all dressed up in their traditional dress. And we also have something at school called Culture Day during that time, where we have the teachers educate the kids on traditional food, traditional crafts and things like that. Here's our grade 2 teacher, Miss Titus. I'm not sure what they're making, but here was a grade 1 grandmother. She came to make fungi, which is kind of like mashed potatoes, but made out of cornmeal. Take a look at the reaction of grade 1 Micah.
That tastes good enough. I can eat this like a chili.
Antiguans are quite dramatic. They like to be theatrical, as you can see from Micah there. What are the living conditions like? We have members who live in homes like this, which you'd probably consider nothing more than to be a shack. I have one shut-in that I visit. In one room, there's 3 beds just shoved together. I think they're double beds or maybe twins. And there's no room to walk other than to get into the room. And 4 to 5 people sleep in that area. And this is a shack where the floorboards, they're rotted through, and they replaced it with plywood, so you're walking, and you kind of bow down, and and it's really eye-opening as you think about some of these people really are what we would consider to be in the poverty line. On the other hand, you do have people who live in homes like this. This is our neighborhood. We live up the hill. We don't have a pool, don't know these people yet, hoping to get to know them. We live in what's called the working rich neighborhood, so doctors and lawyers and, of course, Wells missionaries get to live in this address of the Crosbys. What does a nurse make? $25,000. These are U.S. figures, $25,000 a year. A teacher is $12,000 a year, and we really don't know how they can make a go at it because the cost of living, Sarah will talk about that, it is really quite expensive in Antigua. And so people will work 2 or 3 jobs, and you'll often hear them say, "I'm hustling, Pastor, I'm hustling." Because they're going from one job to the next. They have another scheme, to make money off the tourists. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's just, they're just trying to survive. So that's something to keep in mind when you do go visit these places. I know you get hassled by, people selling trinkets, this and that. But I think just work that into your budget to say, this is a way that I can support them. It isn't charity. They're working hard at getting these things together. And just say, okay, this is part of how I can support them in the work that they do. So tourism is big, the big industry. That's the port of St. John's, and we will have anywhere between 3 to 6 ships come in a day. And of course, those of you who've been in cruise ships, those are floating apartments, right? Floating cities. So you have all these people just coming off the boat, and cab drivers meeting them, tour guides meeting them. If you happen to be on a cruise, don't make the mistake of many people and opt to we're going to walk around town. That's a bad idea. That's not why you go to Antigua. The town is nothing beautiful at all. Open sewers, just their local shops. You want to go to the beaches. That's why you go to Antigua. So you'll need to just have some pocket money so you can take that cab drive out to one of the many beaches, and you'd be much happier for doing that. There are 102,000 people who live on this 108 square mile island. Again, here's a shot of St. John's Harbor. You can see the cruise ships. And our church then is just up the hill. You can't see it, but we can see the cruise ships. We can see the harbor from the church, from the school. And then our house is on the north of the island, so we live up here. It takes it's 4 miles as a crow flies, but anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes even 45 minutes to get to church. So that's been one of the challenges. We're here, I wake up, and Pastor Metzger, you roll across the parking lot and you're in your office, and that, I miss that. What language do they speak? Well, Jolie's going to tell you.
Morning, how things. My presentation is on Antiguan dialect. The official language of Antigua is English, but many people speak dialect. Dialect was formed when the British brought different African tribes to Antigua as slaves. The slaves needed a new way to communicate in their new land, so they created a new language by mixing British words with African words and phrases. Dialect was discouraged by the British because they couldn't understand what the slaves were saying. They were worried the slaves might be plotting against them. They wanted everyone to speak standard English. Dialect was used more freely after independence, which was in 1981. Dialect is a language that is always changing. Some people can even tell what part of the island you are from by the way you speak dialect. On my poster, I have some everyday dialect. Listen carefully, and I'll tell you a little story to go with them.
So, Jolie, you want to get rid of your gum, first of all? want you to do. That's going to help you with the rest of the presentation. I'm buying you some time. Get rid of your gum. Okay, she go. You know that's on YouTube forever now. So she's been speaking a little dialect already. They don't pronounce their THs as we do, but they pronounce it just as the T's, so how tings. Sometimes they talk about beating up each other, and you give each other a tumping, not a thumping, but a tumping. That's another way. And the word little, they say lickle. So like a little boy or a little girl. And that, like, you probably wouldn't pick it up. At first you might be like, did you just say lickle instead of little? So here's a few little funny things. Jolie's about to tell you a made-up story about her principal, Mr. Molyneux, and her grade 4 teacher, Miss Greer. And she's going to work in dialect. Here we go. You sure you got rid of the gum?
Mr. Molyneux and Miss Greer were sitting by the coffee pot in the staff room. Mr. Molyneux said, "Ma hungry, ma want food and yum." Miss Greer said, "Yum yeg and dem." Mr. Molyneux ate his eggs and said, "Ebong good." Suddenly, Naughty Daring came running into the room and did a cartwheel. Miss Greer yelled, "Why?" And Naughty Daring ran out. Then she said to Mr. Molyneux, "Demma pick me, demma drive me mad."
We will have her translate, yeah. So go ahead, Jolie. Read the phrase again in dialect and then give us the translation.
"Ma hungry, ma want food and yum" means I'm hungry, I want food. Yum yeg and dem means eat your eggs. Ibang good means that was good. Boy means boy. And demma pick me, demma drive me mad means that kid is driving me crazy.
And you may have noticed that after Jolie said, "Boy," she did something with her teeth. Do it again. That's called chupsing, and it's a way to show disgust. Did they do that in Nigeria? Yeah, Divine. Divine's probably gotten in trouble more than once for chupsing at his mother. Yeah. You do not do that as a child to an adult, but you hear it all the time. The teachers do it to each other, and etc. All right, go on with your presentation.
Dialect is also found in Antiguan proverbs. These are stories that tell a little life's lesson. Many of them come from West Africa. Kijaki jacket means give credit where credit is due. Datiwata kuaha iron means everything has its use. Huna hear, will feel means listen or find out the hard way. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thanks for that encouragement. I don't think Jolie has received that kind of round of applause at our other stops, so thank you for that. Let me tell you about the work now. St. John's Lutheran Church here, I talked about the bell tower where I was speaking with Ajante. The bell tower is just right in front of our church, and to the side of that is the old school wing, which now houses the church offices and Bible study area. St. John's got its start because in 1972, William Bishop O'Donoghue, a native Antiguan, decided that Lutheranism is teaching the truth about God's Word. How did he come to that conclusion? He had been a seeker his whole life, not just within Christianity, but he had gone from like Hinduism and Buddhism, and he was in Canada, I believe out in Toronto for 9 years, and there he became a Christian, and also there he came in contact with a Lutheran church. He moved back to Antigua and then reached out to Lutheran churches, and eventually the Wells took over the work that was being done there. So this is what our church looks like, the front of the church, and you see the back of the church. We have 700 souls, 500 communicants. We have 2 services from the fall to the summer months, and we're averaging 220, 250 in worship. We used to be up at 350, so there's some work that we need to do there to get our members to be coming on a regular basis. I'm not the only one who serves there. Pastor Jason Richards is behind me. He's a native Antiguan. He grew up in the church, but he went to 1 year at Luther Prep School in Watertown, Wisconsin. He did 4 years at Martin Luther College in New Ulm, and he did his seminary training just as Pastor Metzger and I did. And then he was assigned back to his home congregation. We have the same hairstyles. Yes. Worship is a little different. I just have to say to the choir, you really made it hard for me to preach. I mean, you guys just nailed it. It was awesome. And members, you don't understand how good you have it as far as music goes. You have some very talented musicians and coordinators, so keep up that good work. And I'm not just comparing it to what we have in Antigua. We've been to other churches doing this dog and pony show, and we have not heard choirs like that. So, wow, it was awesome. Awesome. What we do have that might be unique is our steel pan orchestra. I keep calling it a steel pan band, but they don't really like that. They like the word orchestra. Here's our Easter sunrise service. It's outside the church, and you'll just get a little feel for the music. So a lot of churches have steel pan orchestras, and Pastor Richards, he firmly believes that we want to have the culture of the island, and so he would like to have a steel pan playing for every service. We don't always have the orchestra playing, but Jackie Phoenix there, she's our worship coordinator. She always is playing solo pan, and then her nephew is on the keyboard. When they're not available, then they get the St. Albert style of Sarah on the keyboard, trying to make a keyboard sound like an organ. So there's been a learning curve for Sarah there. One of the neat things about living in Antigua is our girls, Mo and Gemma, have had a chance to learn pan, so I'll just show Gemma in action. This is her school pan group. Something else that's different in Antigua from here are funerals. When you have the committal part, you go out to the cemetery, and I remember funerals here. You stand around the grave, and then you lower the casket, and the backhoe comes and does the rest of the job while everyone wanders off to go have lunch or something like that. Not in Antigua. You stand and you watch friends and family take the shovels and throw the dirt, and you wait until the job is finished. So you're standing there for 45 minutes to an hour, waiting for this to get done. And while that's happening, everyone, you're singing. Yeah, sorry. Before we get to Sarah's presentation, I'm going to call Jordan up here to help me fix this. I think I know what the problem is. It's my computer, but you can help me. How does mission work unfold? It's really, a lot of it is word of mouth. Here is a young couple, Angelina and Janera. They are not married, but they had a baby. Janera, the third little bean, they called him. And Angelina came because her aunt has a son at her school, and all new parents that are expected to take a Bible information course. And she's Anglican. She's not going to become Lutheran, but she said, I really like this church. I really like what you're teaching. I have a niece who just had a baby. Would you baptize that baby? I said, sure. Have her come, and we'll study about baptism. And then we not only studied baptism, we did the whole Bible formation course, even did pre-marriage counseling with them. I was scheduled to marry them on June 1st, but Jenner is studying to be a pilot, and his training got pushed off, and so he's like, oh, I want to wait till all that's finished. So that's the challenge. I'd say the big challenge in Antigua are these families, broken families, often single parents, and it's just the way it is. So even among the members, kind of the attitude is, well, that's just how it is. And so, of course, your job as a Christian is to say, well, what does God's word say about this? What's the best way to carry this out? So you can pray for Angelina and Jenner, pray for us as pastors that we continue to hold firm to the truth, that we hold to the truth but do it in an evangelical way. You know, I think there's that fine balance. Here's another baptism I got to do. Lorenzo Hodge, he is one of our music ministers. He's the nephew of the gal that I showed you earlier. But he was an adult baptism, not because he became a Christian later in life. He grew up a Christian, but he bounced around from churches. And we have a lot of Pentecostal-type churches where, of course, they don't do infant baptisms. So by the time he came to us, he had faith in Christ, but now he learned about baptism. So I've done more adult baptisms, I think, in the 2 years there than I did in probably 18 years that I spent here in St. Albert. So that's kind of a neat difference. We have a big confirmation group. Actually, this last year was a smaller one. This coming year, we probably have 25 to 30. And a lot of that, again, are kids coming through our school, and they just continue, and they get confirmed. The challenge is, how do you hold on to them? They get confirmed, and like a lot of big WELS churches, they tend to fall away. So keeping tab of them is difficult. Another thing that I do often is to give people rides. A lot of people don't have their own vehicles. Here's one of my good buddies, Esther. I was just telling, we're staying with Darlene and Colin, and Esther, she messages me every other day. Very short, just like, Pastor, that's it. There's no other message than that. So, good morning, Esther, how are you? That's Esther's son, Noel. So Esther had Noel when she was about 15. But Esther is very, very committed to coming to church. She always calls me up on Wednesday, Pastor, are you preaching tonight? Because we have a Wednesday night service. If I am, then I will pick her up. One of our first experiences in Antigua, we were there 2 days, and we went to the Wednesday night service, and Pastor Richard said, Pastor Habben, can you drop off Esther, Noel, and a few others? Sure, okay. Well, how do I know where to go? Well, they'll tell you where to go, which is fine, but then after I drop everyone off, how do I get home? Right? It's like pitch black, it's dark. So we dropped off the first rider, and then I just went straight because Esther was supposed to be guiding me to her house. She didn't say to turn or anything. And I went down a hill, came to a dead end. Esther looks over at Noel and says, why did you go here? I'm like, because you didn't say anything. You're the navigator. And so we're down this narrow road. There's a ditch on one side and cars on the other. And Sarah gets out and she's guiding me back up. I'm trying to back up in the dark. So we get back on the road, and then the next thing that Esther does is all of a sudden she leans over me and yells out my open window, yo! She saw someone she knew. And that's what you do in Antigua. You just yell at random people. Well, they're not random to you, but give me a heart attack. I think we're becoming acclimatized to it because now Sarah does the same thing. She's driving around, just yells at people, yo! Spencer, you had your hand up? Yeah, don't you remember? I took a selfie here like my last Sunday. Yeah, it wasn't a very good picture, but I did take a picture. Yes, we do. Thank you. I had to go to a tropical island for that to happen. Another way that we do outreach is the traditional Vacation Bible School. They just finished it 2 weeks ago. And we had 100 kids 2 years ago. I'm not sure what the numbers were this year because we were, of course, off island. But you'll notice that we're not just doing outreach to what's called traditionally native Antiguans. So there's quite a few Chinese that live on Antigua. There's quite a few Syrian families, and not because they're fleeing the civil war that's going on right now, but they've been there for 100 years. And so they're really as much Antiguan as anyone else, and yet there is a bit of a, I won't say discrimination, but prejudice between the two. There's often envy because the Chinese and the Syrians, they're the merchants. They have the stores. And then the Antiguans can be, they talk about that. And then the Syrians, they talk about the Antiguans and their quirkiness, and it's just what I was talking about in the sermon today, about that's why Cornelius is so amazing, that he reaches out to this culture where God had placed him. Our big outreach arm, however, is our school. We have a Lutheran grade school staffed by all Lutheran teachers, and we have 345 kids that are enrolled for the coming year. This makes it the largest synodical parochial school in the system, because we only go up to grade 6. There are some schools that are slightly bigger, but they go all the way up to grade 8. So people come to us, why? Because we're seen as a school that provides good education. Some of them come because it's Christian education. Others, they see the test results that the grade 6 kids put out when they take their nationalized testing. And for that reason, they keep coming to us. And what we say is, we're glad that you're here, but this is not a school that happens to be connected to a church. This is a church that has a school. That's what I tell all the parents. I say, because of that, we expect you to take a Bible information course. You don't have to join, but you need to know what we're teaching your kids every day. And from that, then, we get new members. So that's why you have such big growth. You may have noticed that the kids do have school uniforms. It's not just our school. Every school on the island, they're expected to wear uniforms. And I think that's probably just borrowed from the British schools. Another way that we get parents into our church is the kids will sing periodically through the church year. So these are the preschoolers. And maybe, Jordan, let's try to fix that audio right now. Come on up here. I think, hold on, everyone. Talk amongst yourselves. So it's going through the HDMI. So I need to, how do I get to the audio?
I know we've been having issues with this, because I can get it to play perfectly fine over the headsets and over the internet, but for some odd reason it hasn't. I don't even know what we did.
This is C.
No, this side.
That would help, yeah. But it's just coming through there instead of the speakers. I don't know. But we'll go with that. Let's try it better. All right, we're going to give it a try. I think I increased the volume a little bit. It's still not working through the speakers, but here we go. Listen to the kids sing. And his aunt brings him. He has cousins that are still school members there, but you can keep Alonzo in your prayers. We think there's probably some what affects just his developmental with speech and all that seems to be delayed, and I don't know if it's connected or not. Yeah. No, parents have to buy them, but the government gives you a ticket, and they pay for like one set, something like that. So they subsidize it. Yeah. Not necessarily. Yeah, for us it's it's like a polo shirt and a pair of shorts. It's not that big a deal, but yeah, for them, yeah. Here's our church chairman, Mr. Bino, and he's a testament to, I guess, how God is working through the school. He came to our school, transferred in grade 5. He was dyslexic, and he had bounced around from school to school, and someone, it just wasn't progressing. And someone said to his mom, "Why don't you try the Lutheran school? And they're pretty good." So he transferred in to grade 5 as a 15-year-old. And you might think, well, how's that going to work? Well, it worked. Mr. Bino has that kind of temperament. He's a very gentle soul. And yet he now is our chairman. And in fact, he's our delegate to the Synod Convention this coming year. And he even does scripture readings, even though he still struggles with this dyslexia. And so it's just neat to see how God has instilled that in him from those grade school days, where he's like, this is my church, these are my people. And now he's giving back in very big ways. So he's one of the go-to guys for us, certainly. I'm going to hand it over to Sarah.
I'll flip, I guess. How do I flip? It was a bit of a lie to tell you this only took 45 minutes, I can see already. Sorry. You okay for a little bit? Okay. Too bad. Door's shut. You're caught with me. So as you can imagine, moving to a foreign culture after you've been in one place for 18 years involves a bit of a learning curve, sometimes a painful one. I'm going to take you on a little journey on my learning curve, and stop number 1 I would call, my way is not the only way. No surprise, right? But we learn this in sometimes obvious ways and sometimes not so obvious ways. And the first most obvious way Simone did warn us about, and that is the Caribbean concept of time, which is maybe not even a concept for them. The first wedding I played for, I showed up half an hour early with my pre-service music, and I was still playing pre-service music an hour and a half later. Pastor Richards came up to me and he said, that started mostly on time. I've been to weddings that have been 2 or 3 hours late. And as a side note, his own wedding was an hour and a half late. And he was married in the States, but fortunately by a previous missionary to Antigua, so they knew what they were getting into. So, of course, in our family, we were raised with a Japanese adage and German adage that if you're early, you're on time. But if you're on time, you're late. In Antigua, if you're early or on time, you just wait. And sometimes wait and wait and wait. And we've learned to wait a little bit more graciously than when we first arrived. So gone are the days when we'd be preaching here, Dan would be preaching here, and Jordan would be timing him down to the minute for a 20-minute sermon. We've learned to go through services that are about an hour and a half long usually, and we are there from 8 o'clock in the morning till about 1 o'clock, 1:30 before we get home, and that's the average Sunday for us. One sermon that Pastor Richards preached early on that had us kind of looking at each other sidelong glances was when he was talking about our church identity, and he said, we are the church on this island that's known for starting on time. And we were like, because that very service had started 15, 20 minutes late as usual. So we are learning to reinvent our concept of time. Another way that we have learned that my way is not the only way is a little bit funnier. It's their ideas about rain, strangely enough. Here, I know you've got a lot of it over the summer. I can see how green it is, and we've endured just one day of it, and I'm tired already. But, my way in Canada when it rains was to send the kids out in their boots, go splash in puddles, find worms, have fun. But Antiguans are convinced that if they get wet in the rain, they will get sick, a head cold. And they come all the time with head colds, and it's because they got caught in the rain. And finally, by year number 2, I was ready to challenge an Antiguan on this. I'm teaching remedial, so I see about 55 kids that come to me to boost their reading skills. Anyways, all the time the kids are like, the rain made me sick. And I said, it's not rain, it's germs. Try not picking your nose. Try washing your hands. But then I had an Antiguan adult helper, and I said, how come Antiguans think that the rain makes them sick? How come I was out in the same rain as Pastor Richards, and he's sick and I'm not? And she's like, well, the rain doesn't make white people sick. It makes Antiguans sick. So you cannot argue with that logic, people. Just go with it. There was a recess, we were there early on when Dan was on campus, school campus, and he heard this screaming and yelling. And so he made a logical assumption that there was a psycho on campus with a meat carver, and he ran to his window, and it was just that a shower had started. And the teachers have to haul everybody into the classrooms and get them out of the rain so the parents are mad that their kids are sick. Another way that I've learned, my way is not the only way, is with potlucks. We are so looking forward to your potluck because you know how it works here. You go down the line, you take as many of Miss Kim's meatballs as you want and Spencer's cabbage rolls, and you skip over the salad and get the Timbits, and everybody's happy. But in Antigua, you stand in line, and then you get handed a styrofoam box or a cardboard box, and you have an S on it or an H on it. The S is for saltfish, the H is for haddock, and that is your choice. Everything else is pre-packed for you, and it looks a lot like this. This is actually kind of a clean box. The fish is oily and has a sauce with it that melds in with the donut thing that's there. They call it a bake. It's like an unsweetened Timbit. And the salad they don't put dressing on their salad, so that's just fish sauce on there. And then there's some vegetables in. They call that ground provision. Whatever comes from the ground is their vegetable for the day. Steamed spinach. They love their pumpkin. That's a potluck in Antigua. Still working on enjoying those. Here's another way that really took me by surprise, especially being in the classroom. I would have kids coming to me and talking about being beaten by their parents, some even showing me marks on their arms and legs, and I just was like, what is the number for social services? Telling the principal about these stories that I'm hearing from the kids. But their idea of corporal punishment is very different than ours here in Canada. My last couple years here, I was working in a preschool system. We weren't even allowed to put sunscreen on the kids because that could be misconstrued. But in Antigua, it's very, very common for teachers even to take kids over the knee, as they say, and spank them in front of class, for parents to take them by the ear and drag them down the hallway. There is a mom at school who even keeps a belt in her purse for that special purpose of beating her son if he is misbehaving, which he does a lot. So the classmates just gather around and watch him get beaten. This little girl, I hope you can hear her, is Jamela. Super adorable. She's one of my grade 1 kids. She comes in a group of 4. She was introduced to me by her classmates. This is Jamela. She doesn't talk. She can't read. It turns out Jamela could read, actually better than them, but she was just super shy. And Jamela is not super shy anymore. Being in a small group really made Jamela blossom, and her dramatic Antiguan flair has totally popped out, and I have to apologize to all her future teachers because I have unleashed a lion, I think. But Jamela tells a story here about how her little brother was found by her mom playing with matches. The mom had left matches on the stove, and the little brother got him and managed to light one, and the mom was beside herself and threatens dad on the little brother. He's preschool age. And here's Jamela's version of the story.
And then she did this. Tell me the truth, good boy. Tell me the truth again. Yes, I call your father, let he lash you down. And then he almost went to heaven.
So I'm going to have to say it again for you, but first, of course, she's got the dramatic retelling, so the little boy's like this with his mom, and the mom's like, are you lying, little boy? Don't lie, else I'll call your father and he'll lash you down. And then she says, and then he almost went to heaven. The little boy. He did not. She verified later that he was still alive, and he just got a little mark on his arm, but that is Jamela. Sorry, you can't hear her better. She just has an adorable accent as well. Okay, so lesson number 2 on the learning curve is to learn to live with ambiguity. In Canada, things are fairly cut and dry. I know some of you have tried to renovate basements, and it can be a headache of not knowing when it will ever be done. But generally speaking, you have something that needs to be fixed, and you figure out it'll be fixed in a short time. You're given a date and a cost. Well, in Antigua, my vacuum broke, and Dan took it to a local fix-it place, and the guy said, okay, I can fix it. Call me in 2 or 3 days. Dan's like, we call you? Yeah, you call me. Okay. So in 2 or 3 days, this became my job. I called them up and I said, my husband dropped off a vacuum a couple days ago. What does it look like? It's gray and blue, canister, Panasonic vacuum. I haven't looked at it yet. Call me back in 2 or 3 days. So I did, called back. My husband dropped off a vacuum a week ago. What does it look like? It's a gray and blue Panasonic canister vacuum. I haven't looked at it yet. Call me next week. So next week I called, same conversation 2 more times. By week 3, I thought I have to resort to begging now. So I called up. My husband dropped off a vacuum about 3 weeks ago. It's gray and blue. It's a Panasonic canister vacuum. If you can't fix it, just tell me, because I've got 4 kids with really long hair, 6 cats, a person who comes over to my house frequently who's allergic. I need my vacuum. So if you can't do it, just let me know. I'll take it somewhere else. No, I can do it. I will call you in a few days. Really? Well, in a few days, my phone did ring, and the caller ID said it was the Fix-It place. So I did a little happy dance and answered the phone, and he said, Madam, I have fixed your green vacuum. He's fixed the, what? I don't have a green vacuum. He said, are you sure you don't have a green vacuum? I said, yes, I have a gray and blue Panasonic canister vacuum. Are you sure it's not green? It's not green. Okay, I haven't looked at it yet. So I hang up the phone. Dan's like there. You should have taken the green vacuum, Sarah. That vacuum never did get fixed. We gave up. So anyways, another story. I will make this one a bit shorter. But we had trees that hadn't been trimmed in our yard for ages, years, and they're towering over the trees, or the roof of the house, which obviously isn't safe in hurricane season. So we hired a delinquent member, which in retrospect was maybe a mistake. And he was supposed to come with a team. I assumed there would be machinery involved. They showed up in a little 2-door, and 2 guys crawled out of the back with an axe. And they went to town on our trees, cutting them way farther down than we expected. They did eventually have an electric saw as well. They had to borrow a rope. Anyways, they brought down our internet line in the process, but they did chop the trees down to size and left this huge pile of brush. It goes back as far as it is wide, maybe farther, so it is a massive pile of brush, and promised to be back at the end of the week to pick it up. And we paid them for that. And it has been 4 months and counting, and that is still there. It is the harbor of refuge for snails and tarantulas and rodents, so my cats enjoy it. My neighbor, not so much. We're hoping for a furlough miracle that it'll be gone when we get back. But I doubt it. Another thing we've learned, lesson number 3 on the learning curve, is that every place has its good and bad. And you've seen the Facebook posts. It makes it look really good there. And it is so gorgeous. It is heartbreakingly beautiful in Antigua. We might have a really awful, hard, long week, and then we get to spend an hour at the beach on Saturday, and it's like you're on a tropical vacation. They're eating mangoes. They're free for the picking on the side of the road during mango season, which we're missing right now, but we'll give that up for you. We're okay with that. We have daily rainbows. There's showers all the time, and the rainbows just shoot out of the ocean or out of the ground. They're everyday reminders that God keeps his promises, and we appreciate that. There are the not-so-easy parts about Antigua. Another good thing is that with all the rain, it's very, very hard to kill things, so I suddenly have a green thumb. I cannot kill a plant anymore, which is very fun. Yes, I know. You know how I had the reputation before, though. So one more thing that I truly, truly like, you can't not talk about the people there. They are vibrant, happy, lovely people, and their sense of rhythm is amazing. One of my favorite things about them is that they are not afraid to dance and sing in public. So you go to the grocery store, and it's very common to see a lady pushing a cart and jamming along to whatever's playing on the radio above her, singing right out loud. Teenage, what do you call them? Bagpackers at the checkout line will be singing right out loud. Men are dancing and singing as they wait to cross the road. The teachers are singing in the hallways. Lots of public singing, and I just love that. It's one of my very favorite parts about the Antiguan people themselves. The downy sides. This is not Antiguan road rage, this is mine. Yes, we live on one of 2 major roads that have been undergoing construction in Antigua for 2 years since we got there. The idea was to bring down the lines overhead, put them into pipes, and bury them, which is a really good idea for a hurricane-prone island. But they hired a company from the Bahamas called Bahama Hot Mix, BHM, who, as time has gone on, people have maybe looked a little more closely at and realized they had very little job experience. And they're doing this major project. The roads themselves that they're fixing are only 6 miles in total, probably. So for 2 years, they have been dug up, potholes everywhere. That's why it takes us so long to get anywhere. And every time it rains, there's a new set of potholes. So we are down to one strip of tarmac in the middle and dirt and potholes on the side, and it's like a game of chicken to see who gets to use the tarmac, the ongoing traffic or the people coming towards you. It's fun. But it's gone on long enough that these kind of memes have started popping up even amongst the Antiguans. This one is a Back to the Future reference. Just came back from 2099. Fry's Hill Road is still under construction. And a Titanic reference. So we're glad they have a sense of humor about it. It's not only us going crazy. Here's another downy downside. These are my snails. It's seriously like the plague that God forgot to send on Egypt. There are so many snails every time it gets a little bit wet. They are in our yard by the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And so we've spent 2 years picking up bags and bags of snails every time it's a little bit wet. We have not found a use for them yet, sadly. Apparently they are West African land snails, and we've heard that in Ghana they eat them as bar snacks. Is that true? So we need a recipe then. We bag them. First we were buying snail bait. It's so expensive though, and it works for a couple of weeks, and then you have to do it again. So we quit that. Then we salted them, and my yard was speckled with brown dead spots. So now we just pick them up with our hands and bag them. Throw them away once they're dead and squishy and stinky. Yep. I wish. I think this is stop number 4 on my learning curve. It's patience, learning patience. And my biggest lesson in patience was trying to obtain a work permit so I could work legally and be paid legally. This was a 9-month process for me, and it started with a trip to the police station. It was about 3 hours of sitting there to get my police record check. And then it went on from there to the Ministry of Education multiple times, to immigration, to the Labor Department, to the Treasury Department, all located in different areas. And round you go. And you walk with your papers, as they say, walk with all your papers, because if you should get to the desk and not have something, you just have to start over again. And you better have everything in triplicate, because woe betide you if you think they will actually make a copy of something they need. You have to do it and have it, otherwise, again, go back to start. So your heart is always beating a little bit as you go to immigration. This guy is always standing there. He's the guy that pats you down and checks your purse and makes sure your cell phone's turned off. We're not on a first name basis yet, but I know his backside very well as I stand in line watching him let people in. So, lessons in patience. I did wear out my immigration shoes. Yes, you have a dress code for immigration, and that is to have closed-toed shoes. Everything has to be covered, no sleeveless shirts, no boob tubes, so shucks. But yes, of course, I was walking back and forth one day between immigration and Treasury, and I finally did wear out my shoes. Shoes do not, to be fair, last long in Antigua. They come unglued, but this one happened to happen while I was en route. I'm like this, trying to make it back to the car before my shoes fell apart. So, lesson number 5, life on a tropical island, believe it or not, is not always exotic and exciting, but lots of times it is. And I love running on the roads or driving around and seeing herds of goats and cows grazing and horses. So that's very fun. This is one of my favorite scenes when the Rasta guys bring their horses for a bathe in the ocean. So these are the only seahorses that we've actually seen when we're snorkeling. Just beautiful. And this is a view from my classroom window. I do have my very own classroom with a lovely view. And this is at school drop-off time. So you see the cars have to wait for the cows, and even on the left there's a kid that has to wait for the cows to cross so he can come to school. Very common sights. But you know, there's the daily grind too, and that involves getting up early. You don't sleep in Antigua. It's bright, the birds are loud. Everybody starts their lawn work at 6 in the morning or earlier. So you get up with the sun, you exercise, you go to work for 12 to 14, 8 hours, whatever it is, and you come home and have all your chores to do and homework, and you're doing all of this in 30-degree heat, 80% humidity, no air conditioning. I do a lot of sweating. Me and sweat, best friends. My final lesson, because I know you're starving. number 6, is bloom where God plants you. That's a hard one. But one day I was having kind of a nasty day at school. It was a bit frustrating. The photocopier has been broken for 6 months and couldn't get the principal to do this or that for me. Anyways, I was grumpy, but I walked up the stairs to my classroom and I saw these. I don't know how they were growing. They just found dirt in the corner and managed to bloom. I was like, okay, if they can do it, I can do it. But this is a daily lesson to try to bloom where God plants you. Moving to a foreign culture, my mom always said, she was a missionary in Malawi for 10 years, as many of you know. She said, it's not that God sends you to a place to change the place. Often he's sending you somewhere to change you. And that can be a humbling lesson, to go to a place as a 40-something-year-old and think, okay, I have a skill set. I'm going to go and be an example of how to serve effectively and efficiently. And guess what? It's not always possible in the Caribbean to be effective or efficient. So you learn the lesson that, okay, with God's help, I can always serve faithfully. It might not be measurable. It might feel like I'm ramming my head against a brick wall, but still be faithful day by day. And that you can please pray for us for, not just for us, but for Pastor Metzger and his wife and all called ministers, because they don't always see the fruits of their labor. But God calls us to be faithful, and that's true for you too. And we will have other prayers likewise for you to pray for us. But just to conclude, for me, serving faithfully sometimes means accepting that I can't teach all 55, 60 kids that come to me to read, but I can give them their sweaty hugs and listen to their silly stories and make them know that I believe in their ability. I can't always stop the hurricanes that threaten the roof of my house, but there's absolutely no ordinance that says I can't paint it bright yellow and turquoise, and that's what I did. It was my most fun moment so far. It was a dirty pink when we arrived. Now look at it. Doesn't that make you happy? And I blend right in. Yeah, thank you. I certainly can't stop all the sweating I do, but I have learned to enjoy hanging up laundry in the ocean breeze, and it helps me with my laundry tan. Yes, the girls, I was going to say it. They've listened to this 5 times now. And finally, I cannot, sadly, do anything about the inflated grocery prices, which are way up there. So 4 liters of milk, for example, costs 10 to 12 Canadian dollars. And everything is imported. Everything is costly. You learn to buy expired milk. That's what we've done. Expired dairy products, and stick them in the freezer and use them that way. So can't do anything about that. But on the days when I do find expired milk, it's totally okay for me to do a little dance in the aisle and even sing out loud, and no one will judge me for it. So that is my little learning curve for you. Dan does have some prayer requests, and I promise you get to eat next. Thank you.
So here is a view from our backyard. This is sunrise. We are very blessed. I think it's one of the prettiest situated parsonages in the Synod. The prayer request, Sarah already mentioned faithfulness. So for us, being faithful, being like a Cornelius, not going, oh, we're stuck here. These people are not like us, but reaching out to them and saying, this is where God has placed us. And as Sarah said, not having the attitude of we're here to change them, but we're going to learn from them as well. Of course, we're going to share Jesus with them. So pray that we be faithful. Pray that the congregation and its leaders are faithful to the word. That is one of the challenges where you have a lot of people from other backgrounds, Christian backgrounds coming. And so they'll be listening to your sermon, but maybe hearing it with their ears yet and not truly understanding, baptism saves. The Lord's Supper is real presence. It's Jesus' body and blood with the bread and wine. So that can be a challenge. And also pray for strong leaders. It is a matriarchal society, and so there are more women who are in the congregation than men. And so finding the men who are not only coming faithfully, but who are also going to follow through to do the things that they have said they're going to do, that's a challenge. So, council guys, I miss you and all the work that we got to do together. And we had our challenges, right, and frustrations, and yet the Lord blessed, a lot of the things that we did. And I just pray that that council, too, gets to that point where they have the confidence to go ahead and do things and not wait for synod or for the missionary, but to say, this is our church, this is our people, so let's reach out to them. We'll take questions as we're mixing and mingling with you. Why don't we dismiss with the prayer for the meal. Is that okay, Pastor Metzger? We're at that point? All right. Why don't you stand? Heavenly Father, thank you again for this morning where we could hear your word. Thank you for the privilege of bringing us, the Habbens, back here in St. Albert. We thank you for all the memories, all the love that the congregation has shown us. Continue to bless the work here, especially with Pastor Metzger and Lydia, in the talent set that they bring, that you have given to them. Bless the food, too, that we're about to receive, and the fellowship that we'll still enjoy. We pray this in your name. Amen. Go. Eat. I'm hungry.